Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for waiting and welcome to this online event from Pearson. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items so you will know how to participate in today's event. Before we discuss how to download any associated materials and use the platform, I would like to inform you that this session will be recorded for regulatory purposes and for our quality assurance. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter anytime by typing your questions into the chat box, which is located at the bottom right side of your screen. You may also interact with the presenters in the same chat box. Chat box is designed for sharing ideas with the whole group, and anything you type into this window can immediately be seen by other delegates in the room. To enter a question or comment, type into the bottom section of the chat window and hit enter on your keyboard. You may also use the same chat box for assistance in case you encounter any technical issues in viewing or listening to the webinar content. At this time, everyone is joined on mute, but will have the control to unmute themselves, so please stay on mute if you don't need to speak. To queue for questions, click on Raise Hand at the menu bar at the bottom. If you don't see this, click on the icon labeled Participants and select Raise Hand. Otherwise, try holding the letter Alt and the letter Y on your keyboard. Okay, that's all I need to go through for now. So it's with great pleasure that I hand you over to our presenter for today. Michelle, thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Pearson training event for the BTEC Tech Awards for Travel and Tourism for 2022. So with this session, we're going to be looking at the marking and moderation for the internally assessed components for travel and tourism. I'm Michelle. I am a travel and tourism assessor, just like yourselves. I've been an assessor now for the last 16 years in further education. And that's teaching on level 2 and also on level 3. And I've also been an assessment associate with Pearson also since 2010 as a standards verifier and also as an examiner since 2014 on the level 2 exam as well. So I'm just like yourselves, I assess, but I also do quite a lot of roles for Pearson as well. So welcome aboard this afternoon's session. So the aims of the session, so we've got quite a lot to get through. Hopefully you've all been able to download the various materials that work alongside this presentation. It's not a problem if you don't have those. You will be sent a copy of the recording, so you can watch that at your own leisure and also go back over the materials as well, so that's not a problem. So what predominantly we're going to be looking at today is looking at the levels-based mark scheme. So this is a completely different approach. Those of you that are experienced assessors and have taught on the old Tech Award programme, we're not using the pass merit distinction to assess anymore. We're looking at this best fit approach, which is very holistic, and we'll go through the mark schemes as we're looking at the different materials so that you'll get a feel for how we actually apply that particular approach. We're also going to be looking at the Pearson Set Assignments, or the PSAs, as you may have started to get to know them. Also the exemplar standardization materials, or the ESMs. We're going to be looking at the moderation process because hopefully you've already seen that there is now no longer standards verification attached to the new Tech Award. So it is going to be a moderation process. We're going to be looking at quality assurance and admin, how the moderated assessment series are run, awarding and grading, results and review of moderation, key dates for your diaries, and any further support. There's quite a lot of different support networks out there from various different sources, and hopefully if you haven't seen all of those already, you'll see those further along. Okay, so in terms of looking at the marking grids, so in terms of the marking grids, you'll find those on the Pearson Set Assignments. You'll also find them in the specification. One of the things that isn't part of this presentation today is there is also a teacher's guide that is available to you on the Pearson website. If you have a look at that, it's got absolutely in-depth information. It answers every question that you have. It's really good for those of you that are absolute beginners to the qualifications as well. And it's a really good resource to have next to you when you're planning, when you're assessing. So I will show you where that is at the end of the session today. So we're looking at the assessment decision section of the Pearson Set Assignment, or the PSA. We're going to be looking at the best fit approach. So we're looking at a 12 mark per grid and 3 mark per band structure, making best fit decisions more consistent. So again, as I said, the most important thing to take away from this slide is the fact that we're not looking for pass, merit, distinction grades any longer for any of the components, but more of a best fit approach. We're also looking more at a compensatory nature when we're looking at our learner work. So essentially, when you're looking at the grids, which we'll look at in a second, you're going to be applying any grade, or sorry, any marks that you feel the learner has earned during that piece of work. And all of those marks will contribute towards their overall qualification. So it's not to say, well, you know, it's not good enough, it's not a level 2. All of those marks will be crucial to that learner overall once they've completed all of the assessment. So the descriptors and the marks available, it's really, really important to look at that holistically. And when we look at the grids, you'll actually see how we can apply those and what a low pass looks like, a mid pass and a high pass. Okay, I'm just going to come out of the PowerPoint for a second because I'm just going to go into a document, which I hope we're all going to be able to see. Okay, so we are going to look first of all at the Pearson Set Assignment for component 1. Can you all see the document that's up on the screen right now? Can someone just give me a yes? I can't see anything in chat right now. So if someone could just unmute and just say yes or no. Can anyone see that? Oh. Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't realize you couldn't unmute. I thought you could. Okay, we need to check that. Okay, that's brilliant. You can see the PSA, perfect. Sorry, I try not to press too many buttons because then there's the risk of things disappearing and going wrong. So thank you for that. So in terms of the PSA, so we're looking at the component 1 PSA. Just a couple of tips with your PSA. Excuse me. This can't be amended, so it's not like any other assignment brief that you've ever used. It's something that can't be adjusted to suit the centre, so it needs to be used as it appears online. And if we just move on, so we've got the tasks that are set out. And one other question that does crop up quite a lot with this PSA is the choosing of organisations. Something that it's not actually anything new in terms of assessment, but when learners are asked to select an organisation, that actually is down to the learner. It is their responsibility to choose an organisation. So essentially what we're saying is not to actually for the assessor just to say to the whole cohort, okay, let's all do one organisation and we're all going to do the same. It does need to be, you know, some discussion between the assessor and learners, more so that you can make sure as an assessor that the learner has chosen an appropriate organisation, but the whole cohort shouldn't be doing just the one organisation. So that's a really crucial point for these PSAs. I'm not going to go over everything verbatim because you've got these to look at your own leisure, but more so just some careful attention to the levels of control. So the formal supervision and also the monitored preparation, those are really the key things to get our heads around in terms of assessment. And then instructions to learners so that they're clear on what's required of them and what time they've got. Another really useful note to point here is that where you've got guided times or where you've got times that are specified, these are for guidance only. So if you're thinking, well, you know, my cohort actually, you know, they're going to need a little bit more time, that's fine, as long as none of your learners are disadvantaged in any way, i.e. if learner A gets 3 hours and learner B only gets 1 hour. That's never been appropriate in any type of assessment. So really it's up to you at your own discretion, the amount of time that you give to your learners to complete the task. So the Pearson timings are for guidance only. Okay, so here the section pretty much as it always was, the format as an assignment. I want to get to the grid. Teach guidance as always. And this is the part I want to look at. So in terms of the marking grid and applying those marks, we're going to look at some exemplar materials in a second and see how we actually apply those different marks. But essentially, to look at this holistically, you need to look at your learner work and decide, okay, where does the evidence fit? And if we were to look at the old way of assessment on the old Tech Award, where we had, you know, a level 1 pass right up to the level 2 distinction, you're making a judgment here and you're deciding, okay, the evidence in front of me, is it limited? Is it adequate? Is it good? Or is it comprehensive? And it's then deciding which mark band your learner work falls into and how many marks you feel that that learner has achieved. We would always say start at the higher end of the mark band. So if your learner's produced an amazing piece of work and you're deciding, okay, mark band 4 I feel is appropriate, and there's very little that you can see in terms of gaps and omissions, work on the higher basis, so the 12 marks. If anything is missing, a couple of points here and there, then maybe you would drop the marks down to 10, but still within mark band 4. And that's the way that you would holistically apply your marks to that particular PSA. And you're going to do that for every single task. Okay, so as we work our way through, and we can see each task, apply the appropriate marks to that. Only really drop marks if, you know, there's just a minute thing missing. Try not to, I know it's difficult when we're assessing, especially for the first time on a new qualification, but nobody is there to catch you out. When it comes to moderation, nobody's going to be, you know, over-analysing anything. It's really to find the correct mark band, essentially. If there are any kind of differences between moderation and the marks that the assessor has awarded, that's obviously a point of discussion, but really it's finding the right mark band and sticking with that and then applying your marks that way. So that is our PSA. So this is component 1. And what we're going to look at is some materials and how we then apply that particular mark band. So I'm going to look at a low piece of work. Okay, can you still see my screen? So I've now got on the screen exemplar standardization materials. Let's look at my chat. Perfect, thank you. Okay, so we're going to look at this piece of work and then see where the marks have been awarded. These, if you haven't seen these exemplar materials, they are on the website. These materials are really, really useful in your teams. If those of you that have assessed before, where you're using them to standardize within your team, this is what essentially they're used for. So this particular piece of work is a low mark piece of work, and we're just going to look at the evidence and the mark. Okay, so total marks awarded was 12. And when we look at the learner evidence, so the PowerPoint presentation, so we're looking at limited evidence here. We've got one bullet point here for ownership. We've got a mission statement that has been lifted from the internet, so not the learner's own work. We've got bullet points again for products and services. And essentially, just looking at this, I hope you can all see that there's no level of detail. It's not comprehensive in any way. So looking at the mark scheme and looking at the commentary, it's very, very limited in terms of application of knowledge. The learner hasn't shown any real understanding of ownership, aims, products and services of YHA Street. So therefore, the lowest band, mark band 1, would be the best fit for this particular learner. Everything overall is superficial. They've tried, and that's the main thing. And it's not to say, okay, well, you know, what a shame they're not going to get anything for this, because you are going to give them some marks, but of course on mark band 1. Again, with the exemplar materials, some tips in terms of assessment. And again, it does clarify here in terms of where your learners need to choose an organisation. As assessors, you can give them ideas. You might want to have a bit of discussion with your cohort. Hopefully across the content delivery, you've talked about different organisations. You might have had some that have come in and done some guest speaking, or you've gone and taken the learners to an organisation for a talk or a trip. But ultimately, within their learner work, it needs to be them deciding which organisation that they want to research and then produce that evidence. So that's very much the lower end of the scale. And then task 1B, again, we've just got bullet points. They've tried, they've had a little bit of a go here, working together with other organisations, not really appropriate, working with a fish and chip shop. They're not showing any understanding, unfortunately. So again, limited application of knowledge and understanding, doesn't show, you know, any knowledge of how organisations work together. So overall, superficial and simplistic, and therefore on that lower mark band 1. Another tip on there, so work schemes are, I believe they're actually being produced. They're not available at the moment, so it's something to keep an eye on the website for schemes of work, schemes of learning to come through that you can use. So overall, it is very simple and very basic. Some of you might be looking at this thinking, oh, I've got a learner like this. I know I've seen work like this before. And the idea of being compensatory in nature is so that, you know, it's great the learner has had an attempt. And it's only right that as assessors, we give them some credit for what they have tried to attempt, regardless of whether or not, you know, they have met all of the required criteria. Again, as we move down, everything is basic, limited, superficial. Mark band 2. So we've changed here, mark band 2, we've moved up. So there is more detail here. And that's when we can start looking at, okay, more detail. Let's look at the next band up. So we've moved on to more adequate knowledge or demonstration of learning and knowledge here. Okay, so that's the low mark. We're going to look at the mid mark, which that's the high mark. Okay, so I've changed document now. I'm now on the mid mark, which hopefully we can, oh, it's going on with my computer. Oh, why is this freezing? It's not doing what I wanted to do. Let's go back to the top. Okay, so I'm now on the medium mark example. Just to double check, just give me a yes, just to make sure that you can all see this document. Perfect, thank you. Those of you that are, it's brilliant that you're all networking on here, that's fantastic. Those of you that are putting questions onto the chat, I will get to those at the end, so don't worry. Okay, so medium mark, and exactly the same as before, just get to the learner work. Okay, so total marks awarded was 33. Task 1A was falling into mark band 3 and was awarded 8 marks. So if we start to look at the differences between the low and the medium, already at this point, we can see a little bit more detail. And we've got certainly more detail here on how this organisation is run. So it's a board of trustees, how it gets its funding. So there is definitely application of knowledge here, which puts us definitely up into the higher bracket. Mission statement. Yes, the mission statement has been taken from the internet. However, the learner has commented on it. And it's always, rule of thumb to say learner work that's just been cut and pasted from the internet and submitted as the learner's own is not acceptable. However, if your learners put in something like this where they've cut and pasted the mission statement, as long as they've commented on it and shown some understanding about that mission statement or whatever it is they've put in, then that is accepted. So, they're commenting on it, independent learning. And so when we look at the commentary, overall, this is showing a good application of knowledge and understanding. We can see clear detail there in relation to ownership, aims, products and services. And so therefore mark band 3 would be the best fit for this. Overall, and again, I think it's important, the more I look at this, certainly, I think it's important not to overthink it. I think it's that just overall holistic look, especially when we've got cohorts where we've got maybe 25 learners and we've got to mark all of this work. So try not to sort of get into, well, actually, it could be that, it could be that. Go with your judgment and go with your gut feeling. And if there are any sort of marks to drop down or mark up, the key point is that you're in the correct mark band, first of all, and not over assessing or under assessing. So I would, from a personal point of view, just try not to overthink where to go in terms of the mark bands. So overall, we would say this piece of work mostly detailed throughout the evidence that they've demonstrated. And sorry, when we move forward, so task 1B, mark band 3 again, it was awarded 8 marks. And the other key point on when we're looking at these materials is getting your learners in terms of presenting their evidence to make sure that they're using subheadings. That's going to help you when you're assessing. As we know, when we're marking, it's nice to know, where our learners are putting in the criteria that we're looking for so that we can annotate. Annotation is still really, really good practice. It's one of the things where, you know, when you're asking colleagues to look at your work for internal verification, having that annotation there is brilliant. And it's also brilliant for moderation. So where a moderator can see where the assessor has awarded marks and where they believe the learner has produced that evidence. So get your learners into the practice of using subheadings as well, because it makes life much easier for those that are having a look at the work. So again, overall, this is a pretty good piece of work. They've shown a good application of knowledge and understanding. Most of the selected travel and tourism organisations are fully appropriate to the context. So they've reflected on a museum, tourist information centre and a tour operator. A restaurant, of course, is not a travel and tourism organisation, so just be careful with the organisations that they choose. And then task 2, again, mark band 3, 8 marks. So again, nicely presented in terms of the subheadings. We can clearly see what it is that they're talking about, advantages, disadvantages. And they've also, just as importantly, put in their sources of information. Still encourage your learners to put in their sources of information, much like their bibliographies from the previous assessments. So overall, mostly developed, mostly detailed. That's not to say it's perfect, but this application, you know, you can drop down a few points just because it doesn't cover everything that was expected on that PSA. And again, useful tips on there, your subheadings and making sure that the learners are putting in where they're actually sourcing their information. Learning outcome B. And again, we can clearly see levels of detail. It's nicely supported by images, and it's fine for your learners to be putting in their images, sources of information. This wasn't quite as good, this task wasn't quite as good as the others. And again, when you're looking at a PSA overall, you know, as we all do, we take into account our learners and what's happening with them. We know our learners best. Sometimes it could be that something's happened outside of school or college, and it's just impacted them on that one particular task. That doesn't mean that, you know, everything drops down and they lose everything. Just keep positive marking, positive awarding of those marks. And then, of course, at the end of the qualification, they'll then fall into that grade bracket. Subheading sources. Schemes of work. So this was adequate, partially developed. So overall, that's a mid piece of work. So I'm hoping that you can see if you've got your mark grid open, where those marks have been awarded. And we're going to look at the high mark piece of work, and I'm hoping you can all see that. Okay. So component 1, again, so this is the high mark learner work. And another useful point for you to note, don't give these materials to your learners as exemplars. It's fine in a lesson if you want to use them to illustrate your point or just to give them a quick visual of what the expectation is, but they're not meant to be given to learners so that they can refer to them throughout assessment. So they're only to be used within the teaching team as part of standardisation and to give learners a little bit of a visual, but not to be kept by learners. So this particular learner, total marks awarded 56, clearly outlined, ownership, aims, products and services at the Ritz in London. Nicely supported by images there. We all love a good image, I'm sure. I know I do. So clearly there we go straight into the detail about ownership and how the Ritz was first built, who owned it. So we get a very good feeling for detail straight away at the first part of the assessment. Aims of the Ritz, that goes into some detail. So that's really great work there. Products and services, clearly identified. Just a small side note on this section. I imagine quite a lot of you might be thinking, well, actually, hang on a minute, products and services, that doesn't look that detailed. And you might also see straight in front of you is a spelling mistake. Now, first of all, SPAG isn't taken into account when you're awarding marks because you're awarding marks on the content. And of course, as assessors, you're going to be communicating individually with learners with regards to SPAG. But with the detail on this particular piece of work, I've had some discussion with colleagues, Pearson colleagues, and we do feel that this should have been a little bit more detailed. So if you are thinking, well, hang on, there's really very little here in terms of products and services, we had hoped that there was more content on this, but for some reason it was shortened slightly. So please don't take this as the absolute, well, I'm going to make sure that, you know, my learners just produce this. We are looking for a little bit more detail in terms of products and services because this is quite brief. But this was something that was a crossover in producing the material. So you're quite right if you're sitting there thinking this is very brief. There would be an expectation to have a little bit more detail on products and services. And again, really good practice. They've put in their sources of reference. Everything is in their own words, which is brilliant. So completely different to the low mark and the mid mark. So we're looking at a much more comprehensive application of knowledge and understanding. It is all fully detailed. Key products and services, yes, it could have been a little bit more detailed, but this would fit overall holistically. So again, it might be, you know, if you are just a couple of, you're thinking, well, actually that part's not as good as the rest, go with your gut feeling and positive mark and give them as many marks, you know, as you possibly can. And again, it's pretty much saying the same thing all the way through. So making sure the work is logically presented, making use of subheadings and sources of knowledge. So that is the 3 different examples and how the mark scheme is applied. And of course, you can use those within your teams, have a play around with it, apply the marking band, and look at those at your own leisure. So hopefully that has brought that part to life for you. Just going to look at the component 2, and we're going to look at the low mark. Okay, so the exemplar standardization materials for component 2, so customer needs. So this is a low mark application. Okay, so this particular learner work has only got 2 marks and therefore falls into the first mark band 1. It's very brief. Recommendation, very brief, very limited, and just the level of content required isn't there. So overall, limited knowledge and understanding of the information that market research methods could provide for chosen organisation. There is some information on primary and secondary research. but they're focused primarily on describing the researcher method rather than giving the advantages and disadvantages that are required. So it's superficial, very limited, also in terms of the recommendation, no application to the tour operator. Therefore, best fit in this instance is mark band 1. And that's a very straightforward low mark 1. Task 1B, again, only got 2 marks, so therefore fits back into mark band 1. And again, if you have got spelling errors, you're not going to be penalised on those when it comes to moderation, so don't worry about that. Some of it just doesn't, it doesn't flow, it doesn't make an awful lot of sense. Therefore, demonstrating limited application of knowledge. They've only used one appropriate source of secondary research. So it is very limited across all of the criteria that they were expected to produce. And again, just some tips really to sort of underpin everything that's in the specification and also in the PSA itself. So these tips here are quite useful because there's quite a lot to get our heads around when it comes to these new qualifications, new processes and materials. Task 2, learning outcome B, recognise how the needs and preferences of travel and tourism customers are met. They want to talk about customer with mobility needs. But again, there's just nothing that would warrant any other mark than a mark band 1. There's no detail. Very, very, very limited. There's only one accommodation provider. So everything is partially developed. And if we think about when learner work is submitted, we would class this as an unfinished piece of work. And again, some hints and tips there. So that's the lower band. Mid band for component 1. Sorry, I'm just getting to the right point here. Oh, no, I don't want that one. I want component 2. Okay, apologies. So component 2, so this is the mid-mark exemplar material. So task 1A, 4 marks, therefore falls into mark band 2. So we've got a little bit of context there, relates to sunny holidays. Adequate, suitable research methods. Learner has given advantages and disadvantages of primary and secondary research. They've covered questionnaires, surveys, observations, and telephone interviews. Disadvantages given, but not all of the advantages that are required for each one. So it breaks every point down, and then overall holistically, that is the decision to pop it into that mark band. Learning outcome A, 5 marks, therefore mark band 2. So we've got some application there. It was adequate. They have used 2 appropriate sources of secondary research. They also identified appropriate trends. So therefore, most of the required travel and tourism trends were identified. But again, it doesn't meet all of the required criteria of the PSA. And again, key point here, a holistic approach has been applied, as although the number of trends given is part of the mark band traits, the quality of the account and recommendations is also a key focus. So sometimes those of you, again, that have been assessing for a long time, where you used to see in Pearson specifications, you must talk about 2 or 3. Again, look holistically. If a learner's, focused on 2 and not 3, but they've actually excelled themselves at those 2, don't be pedantic and put them down. And again, that would be a conversation with the moderator, to sort of explain, well, actually, this is where I felt the marks were justified. It's the same as when you're sending work away for sampling. You wouldn't get penalised necessarily for just missing out one particular item if overall, holistically, the learner evidence was solid and was a good piece of work. Just mark back down. Learning outcome B, needs and preferences of travel and tourism customers and how they're met. So this wasn't so great, very limited in terms of evidence and applying that to a mobility needs customer. Some recommendation. So this is where, again, look at it holistically. So although we can see mark band 4 would be appropriate because of the quantity of organisations that the learner has looked at, however, the quality of the account isn't at that level. So therefore it fits into mark band 1 because overall it's limited application of knowledge. And again, we would consider this to be an unfinished piece of work. They have looked at 4 providers, but they just haven't explained in enough detail the products and services. So therefore that's where they lose the marks. And limited judgment overall. And then your assessor tips as well. And then learning outcome B, task 3A. So here they are making recommendations and travel plans. So this is going, this is where you'll see that the evidence actually goes across different mark bands. So they've used the correct travel plan document. So again, if you're unsure, have a checklist just to tick off actually what is it that they have done and where those marks can be awarded. They have used the correct travel plan document. There is adequate application of knowledge. It meets most of the customer needs and preferences given in the customer profile. There are gaps, and I don't know about you, but me as an assessor, there's always gaps in travel plans. So things like departure and arrival points, timings, detailed breakdown of costs. We need to be as realistic as possible with our learners. So therefore, things like that in the real world wouldn't be acceptable or appropriate for customers. Therefore, learners must do all of those things as part of a travel plan. So therefore, the travel plan itself is only partially completed. So overall, most appropriate to award the top of mark band 2 to acknowledge the good points that we can see within this learner work. And on to task 3B. So they're making recommendations. So again, it's adequate at mark band 2, but there are again quite a lot of elements that are only partially developed. So therefore, as far as the marking grid goes, only 5 marks. So midpoint because it's only adequate on mark band 2. And then we'll look at the high mark paper. Okay, so straight away, so I'll just move this up slightly. Straight away, we can see task 1A clearly sets out advantages, disadvantages of primary research for customer needs. We've got subheadings, we've got detail. So the learner really has put a lot of effort into this particular piece of work. They've made recommendations. So this at this level, so level 2, overall comprehensive knowledge and understanding of the information that market research methods could provide. Fully detailed account of those advantages, disadvantages. Everything overall holistically is comprehensive, well developed and detailed. And isn't it great when we see a piece of work that looks like that? So best fit to this, mark band 4, because all of those traits within that band have been fully met. So task 1B, how do organisations identify research trends? So they're doing a PowerPoint and clearly explaining what they found, what their research has consisted of. They've referenced statistics. And, you know, this particular part, super work here. They've commented, they've got data in there, they've got their information, moving on to their recommendations. Work is presented really, really well, as we would expect from a learner at this level. So overall, comprehensive application of knowledge. The learner has used resources of relevant secondary research, bearing in mind that they must have a minimum of 2. All the travel and tourism trends were identified. So therefore mark band 4 is appropriate. So overall, holistically, full detail across all the sections. Recommendations could have been more detailed. So when we look at that holistically, mostly developed, so mark band 3. But this key point, although the learner has marked band 4 traits for part of the task, it is appropriate to move to 10 marks due to the mark band 3 traits in relation to the recommendations. I hope by using this as a visual that this is making sense if you're looking at your mark band and comparing that with this piece of work. It's quite tricky for me to get the point across without the mark band alongside. So those are both of those Pearson Set Assignments, component 1, component 2, and that is the low, mid and high level work. So if you haven't used those already, use those as part of your standardization within your teams. I'm just going to come back to the PowerPoint. Okay, can everyone see the PowerPoint back up? Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so we have looked at component 1 and we've looked at the material. So I'm just going to move on from these slides because this is what we've just looked at. Okay, so some key points in terms of resubmission and retakes, because that still is applicable to the New Tech Awards. So after marking learner work, the centre may make the decision to allow learners who may not have achieved their full potential to resubmit work prior to the marks going off for moderation, which is the same process, those of you that currently assess, you know, we take work in and we say, okay, there's some further work to be done here, and therefore the learner is allowed to resubmit their evidence as before. Again, the same as before, general feedback can be given to your learners which areas they need to work on, but no specific instructions or decision making can be given to them to tell them what to do. So it's again, like the old style pass merit distinction. Don't give them too much scaffolding, too much coaching, because these PSAs are them working independently without, with limited supervision. So once that's all been done, that then goes off to the moderator. As it stands at the moment, let me just move my screen along. Sorry, I'm just catching up with myself, my slides. Okay, so once those marks have been sent off to your moderator, there is no further opportunity then to resubmit learner work or to improve those marks on that same PSA. So again, it will be a conversation once you get into the process of moderation with the assessor and the moderator. And that process again is different in itself, because unlike the current standardization process, standards verification process, where you send away your work and you wait for a report and you wait for feedback, the new moderation process, which hopefully you'll find much more interactive, where you can have those discussions with your moderator and actually discuss rather than necessarily read a report that comes through. So that should be much more beneficial. There's no longer a minimum grade requirement for each component. So if your learners get a U grade, that still counts towards their overall qualification. So that's something to bear in mind. Just move on. Sorry, I'm just making sure. Okay, so the assessment series in terms of the dates for your diary. So of course, we're well up and running now with the new 2022 Tech Awards. So those PSAs were already released back in October. So in terms of the windows and the submission of marks, so the key date really now for those of you that are up and running is the 15th of December. So all of your marks and the sample needs to be uploaded by the 15th of December. So again, much the same as the standards verification process, where you would come to an agreement with your standards verifier as to the date that you're going to upload all of your learner work that's been requested. It's the same with moderation. However, the date is the same for everybody. So 15th of December, all of your marks and the learner work also needs to be uploaded. And that will go onto the learner work transfer platform. If you've not used it, once you do start using it, it's very, very effective. Once you've uploaded, everything is there then for your moderator to access, and you don't have to worry about sending off various different pieces of documentation and paperwork. Everything is uploaded. So the moderation process itself, sorry, I'm just conscious in case this is jumping slides. I just want to make sure it's not. And it is, it's going the wrong way. Let's go back. So in terms of preparing for moderation, So in a second, you'll see a document. And again, in terms of the reduction in paperwork, you'll see it's one document and you're inputting the marks that you've awarded for that particular learner on the one document. So that's a bonus already in terms of not having so many documents to fill in. So you're, as a centre, you're going to be uploading your final marks for your learners on Edexcel Online. It is a random process, so the Pearson system chooses the sample. Most centres, you'll find that you'll be looking at where you've got a cohort of, sorry, I'm losing the bottom part of my screen here. Your cohorts generally are between 11 and 100 learners. In that context, you'll be looking at a sample size of 10 learners from the cohort. If you only have 10 learners overall in the whole cohort, all of those learners will be sampled. So it does move away from, again, the old process of standards verification, where 4 learners would be selected for the sample. So for moderation, it's now going to be based on still on your cohort size, but the sample size will be in context with how many learners that you have. But really, realistically, 11 to 100 is a normal centre size, so therefore 10 learners for the sample. You'll also be putting your learners into a context of highest and lowest marks for that particular component. And there will be a learner work and assessment record sheet for each learner in the sample. We'll come to an example of that in a second. And all of that is then uploaded onto the learner work transfer platform. If there are entries from the centre for both components, then those will both be sampled. So again, it will be 10 samples for component 1, 10 samples for component 2. And how does this process start? So essentially, the moderator will contact the registered quality nominee within the centre, and then that communication will then escalate down to communication with the assessor or the lead IV at the centre to start having a conversation about putting the sample forward, and everything is mutually agreeable. So the great thing about this is the kind of human voice element, where you can speak to your moderator during the process. Not that you can't speak to a standards verifier, but this is more interactive. The moderator then goes away, completes the moderation process, and then provides direct feedback with the program lead. So again, takes away, although standards verifier will provide a report, you will get feedback overall regardless from the moderation process. Sometimes those of you that, maybe there's been no recommendations or no areas for the centre to work on, you've got a great report, but it's nice to have that conversation, particularly to clarify anything in relation to assessment that you want to discuss with the moderator. So that's a really, really good bonus feature of this New Tech Award. If there are any differences between the centre marks and the moderator marks, which causes a change to the rank order. So again, in terms of the assessment process, the assessor will be putting a rank order of that cohort's marks. In that case, the moderator can request further samples to be uploaded to the learner work transfer. It's a little bit like, again, with the standards verification process, where the SV would ask for further samples to look at. Once the moderator has provided feedback, if there are any discrepancies with that, there's approximately 2 weeks to go back and change any marks should you wish to do so as a centre. Any learner marks can be amended based on feedback, not just those that were sampled by the moderator. Availability for centres to amend marks on Edexcel Online will close on the published deadline in the key dates schedule. After this date, no further amendments can be made. So it's really crucial to to make sure that all dates within the calendar are set as deadlines because they can't be changed. Following moderation, feedback and any amendments to marks the centre wishes to make, the moderator will then review the final centre marks against their moderator marks and finalise the written moderator report. So again, to compare, it will be similar to the old standards verification report. If the final centre marks are reasonably accurate, they will be awarded. If centre marks are still not within a reasonable degree of deviation from national standards, an adjustment will be applied by the Pearson system. Where mark adjustments are made, the pattern of differences between your centre marks and the moderators will be taken into account so that your centre marks are in line with the standard being applied nationally. And again, it's the benchmarking and the national standards that are taken into account here. There isn't a video there, so I haven't missed it. If your centre is part of consortia, you will be sampled across all centres within the consortia, and any adjustments are made across the whole consortia. It is essential to undertake internal standardisation of marking across all centres in the consortium to ensure accuracy of all centre marking. So those are those materials that we've just gone through. One programme lead will need to take responsibility for ensuring internal standardisation, receiving moderator feedback, and also passing feedback on to the other centre assessors within the consortium. The wonderful thing here is that quality assurance has now been streamlined. So 65% reduction in the new tech awards. I'm an assessor. I like to get on and assess and teach. Documents and paperwork is something that we all want to cut down on. So the new tech award, you'll see that there's no assignment briefs to devise because everything comes from the new Pearson PSAs. There's of course no standards verification process, but it is a moderation process. We do recommend annotation. It is really good practice. Internal standardization is required if there are multiple assessors. Recommends to have a program lead, but of course you don't need to produce an assessment plan and you don't need to produce an IV plan. So quite some reduction there in terms of paperwork, which is always a good thing for us and also the planet. And the documents that you're going to be using are these documents up on screen. So on the left is your assessment record, and you can see on the top part there the usual program details, but on the middle section the assessor will write in the task for that particular PSA, and then they're going to apply their marks as per the mark band and then give that a total amount of marks for that learner for that particular PSA. So again, one document for the whole assessment, whereas before you're looking at an assessment record sheet for every learning aim. So that's no longer, which is a good positive. We then move on to awarding. So this is the process used to determine grade boundaries in each assessment series. It indicates the number of raw marks students need to achieve. Now, if you're not quite familiar with UMS and raw mark grade boundaries, there is further information in the specification and also in the teacher's guide, which I'll pull up in a second so you can see what I'm referring to on that point. Just move along with my slides. So with the UMS grade boundaries, which are fixed, so they'll stay the same for the life of the qualification, the raw mark grade boundaries may change for each assessment series. Pearson will publish a raw mark grade calculator or converter to be used following results day, which can be used to benchmark progress and model potential qualification outcomes. However, this will not guarantee actual grade outcomes for future series, as this is subject to awarding. There is further information in terms of the raw mark grade boundaries and the UMS grade boundaries also on the Pearson website. And if you haven't yet seen it, there's also an FAQ section on the 2022 Travel and Tourism Tech Award page. Grading. So overall, at the end of the qualifications, when the grading process will take place, so it's not like you're going to give your learners pass merit distinction for that component and then move on and give them the grading. So everything is based on your marks and the moderation process. Your learners must sit and achieve an outcome for all components. There's no minimum grade outcome required to gain the qualification. So we're not looking at a level 1 pass as a minimum for any component. Even if your learners get a U, that's still considered a positive outcome. Individual components will be graded on a 6 grade scale from level 2 distinction to level 1 pass at the end of all of the assessment. The overall qualification will be graded by Pearson and certificated on a 7 grade scale from level 2 distinction to level 1 pass. The final grade is an aggregation of the marks, the UMS points for each component. And remember, it's compensatory, therefore a higher performance in some components may be balanced out by a lower outcome in others. And again, if we look at our learners across the course of a year, sometimes things happen outside of their control. So this is where you're looking at extenuating circumstances and applying that compensatory nature of marking. The level 2 distinction grade at qualification level will be awarded if a learner has achieved a level 2 distinction in each component and the minimum UMS required for the level 2 distinction star at qualification level. Key dates for results. So 23rd of March for the December-January series, 24th of August for the May-June series. And of course, there's no external assessment because the exam is not until 2024. The review of marking and moderation is available from the results day for each series. The remoderation is based on the same sample as the original moderation. And this process is conducted by a more senior moderator from Pearson. Marks can stay the same or go up, but they cannot be further reduced based on the review of marking and moderation. So that's a key point there. Again, key points for your diaries. And again, you will get sent a copy of this presentation, so you can jot those down at your own leisure. So some key reminders. So your Pearson PSAs can be accessed and given to your learners at any time from the date they're released on the Pearson website. And they're fully downloadable with an Edexcel Online password. Your learners must now be entered for internal assessments in the series that they're going to be sitting them. Made in the same way as for current external assessments. So whenever you're sitting exams, your exams department enter learners. Learners must be entered for both assessments now, so both internal and external assessment. And again, those key deadline dates are available in the schedule. And the Tech Award, this is what I mentioned with the frequently asked questions. I know some of you will have some questions today, and I will do my very best to answer those for you. Sometimes your question may be very centre specific. In that case, if you haven't already done so, I would consider looking at the Pearson customer portal. Again, you'll find that on the Pearson website. You upload your query It's then logged, you're given a reference number, and then you've got a trail of communication between yourselves and Pearson then with any direct centre queries. As part of the training sessions that are being provided, such as today's event, Pearson will gather frequent questions that have come up through various training events, and then they will update the frequently asked questions section. So I would check this periodically just to see if anything has been added or changed, so that Pearson can update frequently with questions that are coming through from centres. In addition to subject-specific support, we have our subject advisor, which is John Walton. That is his contact email there up on screen. Those of you that may be new to delivery of not just tech awards, but also maybe new to the subject of travel and tourism. I know sometimes geography teachers are often asked to teach on travel and tourism. There's also a fantastic Facebook page. It's BTEC Travel and Tourism. It's brilliant for networking. You can pop questions on there. Very, very supportive in terms of people sharing information, sharing resources. There are 2 databases. So those of you that may be teaching on other levels, so level 3, you will also find resources that are being uploaded onto those databases. It is subject to a maximum amount of members, if you like, but it's worth asking the question, worth joining the page, particularly if you're sort of feeling a little bit lost with things, or you just want to get someone's opinion. I'm not endorsing that from a Pearson perspective. I am endorsing that from an assessor perspective. I've used the website myself, asked questions, uploaded resources for different qualifications. So it's a really good support network for us as assessors. I don't believe, since the subject advisor has changed, I don't believe he accesses the page anymore. So don't put any questions for John Walton on there, but certainly from a network perspective, do ask your fellow colleagues, because sometimes someone's in the middle of developing something and they upload it, and it's there to share across the board. So it's a really, really good page to join on Facebook. Okay. And if you wanted to become part of the Pearson Tech Award moderation team, you can put forward an expression of interest. You'll have the link when that comes through to you on your own copy. So you can join the moderation team. Of course, it's brand new to the qualification. I'm not sure if the current window is still open, but certainly get involved. And also you might want to be involved in marking on the exam component, and certainly on the Pearson website, you can apply to join the examining team as well. I know I find it really quite helpful when I'm delivering a qualification to see from the other side of the coin in terms of assessment, looking at the exam marking as well. So it's something really good to get into should you wish to do so. So that is it in terms of content. I apologise that I've probably got really, really croaky. I'm just on the back end of COVID, unfortunately, so my voice has not been brilliant, so I do apologise for that. Hopefully that I've been understood and you've been able to hear me appropriately. I'm going to look at the chat box just to see what's come through. If you do want to unmute yourself and ask a question, you're more than welcome to do so. I'm just going to look at the chat box for a second. Excuse me. So yes, the presentation will be sent to you once the training is complete. So that will come through via your email. downloading materials. So once again, if you haven't got any of the materials that we've looked at on today's event, you can download those from the Pearson website and use them in conjunction with the PowerPoint presentation when it comes back through. Similarities with the TEC award to the first award. I would say not really. I'm teaching on the first award currently myself, and I'm not seeing that many. It's a different process completely with the TEC award. That's just my opinion. Actually, sorry, there is something I do want to show you before you disappear. Oh, sorry. Yeah, great. Some of you are answering questions on the chat as well, which is fantastic. Yes, so where students are using the internet, they can put in their pictures. It does say in the specification and also in the teacher guide, but yes, whilst they're doing their research, they can put pictures in during that time. You can be very flexible with your timings. It's all down to the individual centre and your lesson. So bear in mind, Pearson times are for guidance only. No, correct. No internet in the write-up time. Sorry, there's quite a lot of messages on here, so I'm just making my way down. Normal PC and teacher supervision is sufficient. Okay, so some of you are actually answering questions here. There is quite a lot on there. There's one other document I really would like to show you. Just come out of this for a second. Okay. Can you see? You should be able to see on the screen now. It says supplementary teacher guide. If someone could give me a yes, if they could see that, that would be brilliant.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so the teacher guide, I mean, I do appreciate, of course, there is a lot to read and get our heads around on this, but it breaks everything down, approaching the component, delivering, format of assessment, suggested resources, because I know quite a lot of people say, well, I'm not sure what organisations are the best ones to choose, not feeling confident there, or not necessarily confident on particular terminology in terms of travel and tourism. But this breaks everything down. So this part here, some of you are talking about the actual assessment, what you can and can't do with the PSA. Exactly the required information that's needed from the learners. Suggested times, if you're looking at, delivery, suggested videos, resources that you can access and share with your learners. So this is called the Supplementary Teacher Guide. This is on the Pearson website. under Tech Award Travel and Tourism 2022, and you can download that. It's really, really good to use alongside the spec. I'm not obviously going to read everything verbatim, but there's a lot of information here that supports the spec, supports the PSA and the exemplar materials. Those of you that may be new to travel and tourism as well, Dr. Hayley Stainton produces a lot of videos on YouTube. Learners, well, my learners quite like her. She's quite simplified in how she explains things, but she goes into detail enough that your learners will understand. She's got a lot of videos on YouTube under the tourism teacher. So just nice to again break down your sessions with some videos. So just so many things that you can access and supplement resources and materials that you currently have. The format of assessment, how to administer. I won't obviously talk all the way through this, but there is a lot on here. Once you've downloaded it and had a read through, a lot of things do make sense in terms of individual questions. And on that point of questions, is there anyone that wants to unmute and ask a question? No.
Hello, can you hear me? Sorry, I'm not sure if it's working because I couldn't unmute before.
Yes, I can just about hear you.
Fabulous. So I wanted to ask, I didn't realise we needed to enrol the students to do each assignment, and I'm planning to do one in February. Is it now too late and I'll incur a late fee?
My answer would be yes. But what I would do, because of what I would also wonder as well, and this is where the Pearson customer portal comes into play, is I think sometimes in the early stages of any qualification, there's going to be a few teething problems, and maybe centres haven't realised that they need to, as you've said, register for the components.
On the documents on the Pearson website as well, the timetable was released on the 7th of November, which is already past the deadline. So I don't know how I was supposed to know the date if it wasn't like put out there, and in the specs I've read, I've not seen it. So maybe I'm the only one that's missed this. I don't know, but
okay, no. It's definitely something. I mean, unfortunately I can't pass this forward quicker to Pearson for you. So have you used the customer portal before?
No.
Okay, so if you go on to the Pearson website, sorry, I'm going to just pull up the internet and we'll call it up. So essentially what happens, because this is a personal question for yourself and your centre, and it will be something that would go up to the appropriate level of management within Pearson. So your query is recorded and you get a reference number, and then it comes back as a response, and it is pretty quick. I'll show you how to get there.
Can I just ask you a quick question about the resubmission? So
of course.
What sort of time scale would you, how much time would you give? Because I haven't read anywhere about how much time they're allowed if they're doing a resubmission.
I believe it's still on the old process of the 15 days.
Oh, so not a particular amount of time.
I believe it's 15 days. And I apologise if anyone's seen anything different, but I'm pretty sure I haven't started teaching on this yet because I'm still on the first award, but I'm pretty sure I've seen it's 15 days.
And so you could have some learners resubmitting and some not?
Yes, because it will be like the current process of assessment. Some of your learners will go straight through, not need any additional. Sorry, I'm multitasking. Not need any additional resubmission. So yeah, same as usual in that sense. Not everyone will need a resubmission.
But and it needs to be controlled, like no internet.
I would. Sorry, I've got many hard copies of documents surrounding me. If you go to the specification, have you got the specification?
Mm-hmm.
It is in there.
So you do the resubmission like you've done the first one. I hadn't actually read any guidance about that, but I might have missed it.
Sorry, can I just can you
Yeah,
just
no,
bear with me 1 second? Let me just call up this portal and then I can pull up the specification. Why is this not coming up? Okay, can you see my web page?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so just on the bottom here, where it's got your details for John Walton. So if you just click on the customer support portal, and then it's filling in an online form. So here, depending, you're going to go in as a centre. So it could be that your exams department is wanting to put forward a query. So it's all drop down boxes, and then it gives you the opportunity to then put in your query in here. Then you submit it, and then it comes back to you and it gives you a reference number. And then you get a response back from that. I can't tell you how long that would take, because obviously that would depend on various times, how busy it is with queries coming through. I would imagine it's quite busy as we speak, but this will give you a direct answer to your particular question. So I wouldn't like to say, it may well be that your own personal circumstances mean that actually, a late fee is waived. I can't answer that because I'm not, I'm not part of the higher end management team.
Do you know how much the late fee is? Sorry, just because if it's I don't really understand if we all had to enroll them by a certain date, why the document online wasn't released until the 7th of November if it's already gone past the date.
That's definitely a question that I would put into the portal also, because if you've not had enough time, if that's only just come out, then that's not something that you were aware of. Sorry, I'm just trying to look through.
And so you're saying I have missed the deadline for submitting my students into starting component 1 assignment in February. In November, I've missed the deadline already.
Right, sorry, let's just go back to the PowerPoint. If you got the
I think as long as you've enrolled them in the qualification, as long as you're doing the second sit-in this year, you won't have missed the deadline for that.
They haven't done anything yet. Sorry,
I was just going to say, just a point of feedback that I found. I'm new to BTEC and to delivering the course, but it has felt quite slow with documents being released to us. And like, we've pre-ordered textbooks which were meant to arrive in like October time, and now it's been pushed to December, which is making it quite hard to deliver the course. So I just don't know whether you're able to take feedback and pass that on, but it does feel like the deadlines on Pearson's side are slipping quite a lot.
Okay, that's certainly feedback that I can pass back for you. I do know sometimes with the textbooks, we don't always get the textbooks on the dates that they hope that they would be released for. Okay, so I'm just going on to the key date schedule of the PowerPoint. Learner registrations, so late learner registration fee applies 2nd of November, 23rd of December. High late learner fee. Very high late learner fee. You know, I can't say, you know, that wouldn't be applicable, but if, you know, you're saying that those dates were not available, that would be you know, a case for you to put forward directly, because it will be them that will make the decision as to whether or not that information was out there. I guess I just can't say you're not going to get a late fee. It's just impossible for me to be able to give you that information. But certainly these dates here, when you get the PowerPoint, this is the link to the. In fact, let me just see if I can put these into the chat.
Sorry, the bit I'm confused on is that the date for any student starting this whole course, or is that late fee for students that are doing component 1 now? This is the bit I'm a little bit confused on, because mine aren't going to start it until February. So am I still late?
So much like the old process, so have they been registered on the qualification?
I don't know, because I'm not the exams officer, sorry.
Right, because if we apply it logically, I'm just trying to look at a logical way of looking at this. If it's learners haven't been registered, there still needs to be a registration process for those learners to be on the qualification, like where we register them on the first award or any other qualification. So during September, October, your learners are put forward by your exams department to show that those learners are registered.
Okay, so are those dates for the whole course, for registering somebody for the whole course, or is that for starting an assignment?
Sorry, just bear with me. Let me just post this onto the chat, and then I can.
Yeah, the dates that you've put up are for the whole qualification.
Okay, thank you.
Which your exams officer should have. Sorry, your exams officer should have done that. They should have entered your students for you if you've got your group on Sims.
So that's not my responsibility, sorry, to have to do that. So that's what I'm a little bit confused at, sorry.
Just check with your exams officer.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, can you see just up on the chat box? So those key dates, that's the schedule that is available to everybody. But yeah, learner registrations have always been the case. Once you're, I mean, I'm in a college, presumably you're in a school, but we still have to go through that process of registering on the qualification. So yeah, as was just said, if your learners are not registered, it's not normally the assessor's responsibility, it is your exams department.
Hello, can you hear me?
Sorry?
The query I've got from what I've been hearing is that the registering the students on the course at the very beginning of the course, that's quite logical. Obviously, they're entered to run, so obviously they are part of a course. What's confusing, it appears to be that because you have 2 windows of opportunity throughout the course to do each component, the query appears to be, do you have to make as a centre registrations as to which sitting you are doing for the components?
Yes, I believe you do.
So how is that done? Is that done? Is the exams officer going to contact the assessors and say, look, are you registering your students to do the component now or later on, or is it something that the assessors need to be aware of and then conversely approach their exams officer to say, we want our students to do component 1, whether it be in the December sitting or for the May sitting?
Yes, that's a process of communication, because again, if we think logically, the moderator will need to be aware of who is registered on each component also. So,
I mean, obviously at the moment we're finishing off teaching the Legacy Award, which obviously by the sounds of it you're doing as well. And when you look at the old specs, when you registered students for the course, quite quickly into the course, usually about sort of October time, your moderator or your link, who was going to be standards verifier, would get through and contact you and actually ask you and say, which units are you doing on the course? Now, obviously, inevitably, unit 1 was the externally assessed part of the course, and the other 3 units were then going to be sampled over the duration. But because you sent away to the standards verifier an assessment schedule, it was down to your standards verifier to contact you and ask for sampling that would then fit in line with Pearson's time frame of the year. And providing that marks were entered prior to the 5th of July, it was all sorted out. There was no other contact in relation to the exams officer or making any other entries other than the registration at the beginning of the course. But what you're saying now on the new Tech Award is that basically students who are doing the course are registered round about September. Then because there's now no other communication, obviously the moderators from Pearson's side, they don't know whether you're doing the components in which window in relation to which sitting. Now, unless, is there some form that the exams officers have access to suggest and register when our students are doing either sitting of the component?
Unfortunately, I cannot give you a definitive answer to that, because I'm not working with the qualification myself.
Because what's worrying at the moment, and from what people have said, is that Pearson are late with the production of their materials. They're late sending out details that have got schedules. And then what I'm hearing is that many people now who may have considered doing component 1 for the first sitting, they've not actually registered their learners down for this first sitting because they're unaware of the dates. There doesn't appear to be a process by which the learners can be registered for this. And then there's a potential now that they could be charged a late fee when it's not clear as to what's to be filled in and where.
Yeah, I have to say I haven't had any other communication with any adjustments to what we've gone through today.
I mean, I'll be honest, I've done versions of this course since 2007, going from various versions of QCF, NQF, and backwards and forwards. The current version right now, in terms of the new Tech Award, is very much, it seems to be delivered on a wing and a prayer, and in relation to resources that are available and to get hold of. And, like I've heard many people saying, a lot of people have pre-ordered the textbook, which is now late, should have come out a couple of months ago. And in terms of the entries for, if it wasn't for listening to you now, hearing you say that students had to be entered for the internal components, I don't think I would have known about that.
Well, I can only sincerely apologise for that. I mean, I'm an assessment associate, so I don't work within Pearson. But where you have got, from an assessor point of view and a professional point of view, where you have queries with registrations and are pertinent to that particular centre, I would put them forward so that you have a record.
Right.
Because
well, I mean, my first protocol, obviously, with speaking with one of our assessors, will be, obviously, we've already got a plan when we're going to do component 1, which is going to be the second sitting. But obviously, I now need to know or inform our exams officer to find out, is there some form via via yourselves that needs to be completed to suggest that which students of ours are going to be actually doing the component, and so that you have a record at your end and can select to learn, because obviously this is all then based around you selecting learners for sampling for moderation.
Yeah, it would be, I certainly would be having a conversation with quality nominee or exams. Sometimes, as assessors, things don't get filtered down to us anyway, but other people are aware of them. But certainly registration will be down to the exams department. That's what normally happens in a centre.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's been the case before, because obviously we have a
Yeah.
separate exams officer, and normally with anything in relation to BTEC courses before, we would be informed who, to confirm who we're registering onto the course, and then a little bit further down the line, obviously, we would be pretty much sent a kind of request to forward emails onto what we would onto the system, and then inevitably your standards verifier would get in touch. And at that point, it's very clear between the assessor team and the standards verifier which units have been done. Obviously, in relation to the course, because the students are registered on the course, that automatically, we would then put in which students we want to do on the current award, whether you're doing obviously the January sitting or the June sitting. But obviously, this is something that does appear to be news today, that if this is now the process for all elements of the TEC award, that you need to indicate to the exams officer when you're doing each of the components. Obviously, component 3 is at the end of the course because it's summative. This is something that I need to chase up with them, because they deal with a separate aspect of the administration of the course.
Our exams officer has said that you need to register for each component as you would your exam.
Yes.
I think there's some sort of training that the exams officer did maybe, and the quality nominee, but our quality nominee asked all the subjects that are running the new TEC award to fill in a spreadsheet that says when you're doing component 1, when you're doing component 2, and then obviously the exam is in the second year. So that should have come from your exams officer and your quality nominee.
Right, okay, no, that's useful to hear that, because I can chase that up with them over the next couple of days. Obviously, we're going to be doing component 1 for the second sitting. Obviously, I'm not aware of any dates as yet, other than something you showed a minute ago, to make sure we've not missed any deadlines for entry of the students, obviously, onto those.
Well, again, this is, I do apologise that I can't give you the definitive answer, but I think because every centre is going to have its own unique question, because what's just been said makes perfect logical sense to me as an assessor, in that the quality nominee, the exams team follow normal registration processes and register for each component, not just the exam. It's when it gets into an area where, if a centre says, well, I wasn't aware of this, or do you see what I mean? I just can't, I can't give you that answer as to, okay, you're in the right, or Pearson are in the right.
No, I'm not trying to point it out as a point of criticism or a point of failure. The point I'm sort of making, though, is because this is sort of administrative, and ultimately it does require and it does need doing. I'm quite concerned that obviously we're now approaching what sort of mid-November-ish, and obviously the course for the new course anyway started in September. Other than I'm very well aware that our exam officer has entered our students, has registered our students for the entire course. But as yet, I've not had any feedback in relation from the exams officer that said, and when are you doing what components and the exam when? So that's something that I need to go back to her and find out tomorrow, so that we don't miss any deadlines. But obviously, if this comes back that she's not aware of this, then it does kind of sort of raise the question, well, have Pearson sent out to the exams officers requirements to do training for the new TEC awards?
Absolutely, and I totally understand what you're saying with that, and I think that's the communication, and that's why it's really critical to have it via the customer portal, so that there is a trail of communication.
Yeah.
And then you've put forward your questions and your queries, and then you've got someone that's in the relevant department who's going to come back and give you the definitive answer.
Okay.
But I'm sincerely sorry that I can't sort of give you any more than that, but it's it's a new process, and I would imagine that there'll be a certain amount of not necessarily I'm trying to look for the right word. I
mean, inevitably there's going to be teething issues, of course there are. But obviously, listening to some of the people's comments on here earlier on, when they've decided they were going to enter their students for component 1, and then all of a sudden they're reading that a timetable schedule has just come out on the 7th of November, and some of the dates on this in relation to registration of the students for this component for the first sitting, they've now passed the deadline. That does raise additional complications that then are going to have to run around and resolve. And no doubt get in touch with their exams officers, with Pearson, to resolve, these conflicts of interest with dates and times down the line.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I'm just also just seeing if I can see anything in the specification.
Are these dates that you've now suggested, have these now fully been published for all entry and registration points for all components leading sort of now for component 1, 2, and 3?
The dates that the link I've just put onto the chat box.
Were they the dates and times that you'd suggested earlier on? Are these the current formal registration dates and times for all components now?
Yes, that's the link that will come through when you get this PowerPoint presentation come through to you. That's the link that is on there. I've just put it on there for quickness so that you can download it now.
Okay, nice one. It's just that obviously I need to follow this up with the exams officer as soon as possible to make sure that they're aware themselves, because obviously we have a number of tech awards running in school, and obviously a number of the new tech awards from September, and I'm quite concerned as well that obviously in all subject areas, not just travel and tourism, I would imagine that it's the same principle that applies.
Yes, I would imagine that it's a set principle. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the specification, administrative arrangements for assessment. Access arrangements, special consideration. Right, okay, so page, sorry, I don't mean to sort of palm things off on you, but page 60 of the spec goes into the administrative arrangement section. Learners must be registered in line with the information manual by the 1st of November. Shortly after learners start.
What's just been sent out?
Sorry?
So is the information manual what has just been sent out?
I haven't got that in front of me. That this would have been this is information that's been part of the spec since this was produced. Shortly after learners start the program of learning, you need to make sure that they are registered for the qualification and that appropriate arrangements are made for internal and external assessment. You need to refer to the information manual for information on making registrations for the qualification and entries for internal and external assessment. Learners can be formally assessed only for a qualification which they are registered. If learners' intended qualifications change, for example, if a learner decides to choose a qualification from a different sector, then you must transfer.
So where is this information manual then?
So let's have a look. I'm sorry, I'm literally, just as a side note, when I know a couple of comments there with regards to resources, certainly a company that I'm using Zigzag education, again, I'm not trying to, put any one particular person forward and advertise them, but Zigzag resources are pretty good and a good investment for the department, so something to look at maybe. Right, let's look at the information manual. I'm sorry, I'm literally the same as you here. This possibly is something that your exam, I mean, my gut feeling on this is that your exams department would have this information manual.
Yeah, it sounds very much like an exams officer kind of document.
Yeah.
I'm just what my concern is that I mean, obviously I need to check whether obviously she does or she doesn't have it, but obviously if that's been the case, then I would be expecting that my exams officer, as with everybody else who's commented so far, they should have been approached by their exams officer to basically be saying, when are you entering your kids for components 1, 2, and 3?
Yes.
In line with deadlines coming up, so that they can then make registrations.
Yeah, I think that's a conversation that should have happened already. I'm just going to see if it's in the teacher guide. If it's not, I've not seen it anywhere else on the website. So my gut feeling would be that this is something that certainly is with the exams team.
I mean, I completely agree with what you're saying, and it says it in the spec in relation to refer to an information manual. But if this information manual is for like exams officers only, fair enough. But if it's obviously when normally the people who read the spec are the people who are delivering the course. So obviously, in terms of, I've been able to access the information manual to make sure that obviously everything's covered and registrations are made at appropriate times. Obviously, it's handy to be able to access this information manual.
Absolutely, I do agree, and therefore, if there is an error there in that centres don't have that required information or don't have,
it's pretty fundamental from what you're saying. If it's a document that has to be referred to, but nobody's got the document, neither have centres. I mean, it's pretty basic, isn't it?
Yeah, all I can suggest is having that conversation, but also putting it forward as a query onto the portal, because again, if there are, for example, a large amount of centres who are putting forward, the same query with regards to this document, then obviously that's something that Pearson will need to go back and investigate. It's not something that I can take on for you, but the more comments and queries and questions that are going forward in a formal manner on the customer portal will alert Pearson to a bigger picture, if you like, which, I wish I could, but I can't give you any more than that, unfortunately.
No problem. Fair enough.
All right. Okay, any other questions?
I put it in the chat, but I just wondered, is there a way that we can subscribe to anything on Pearson so that we get notified when there are new documents uploaded? Because it seems a bit hit and miss at the moment whether I find them or not.
Let's go back to the sorry, I'm just finding the page. I think this has changed slightly from when I've previously looked at it, but you can sign up for updates.
Okay.
So
I thought I'd signed up to those, but I'll try doing it again. Just otherwise, it's obviously very time consuming having to go through everything each time to see if there's something new.
Yeah, there is certainly when the pandemic was on, and you would get sort of information that was sent through periodically as like a mailing list. So I'm teaching this qualification. I'd like to receive updates. Centre number.
Yeah, because that's the bit I've done, but I've not, like, I went on the other day and there was a load more new information with like some of those like when the assignments were released and stuff, and I hadn't been notified of that.
Yeah, I don't think it all, anything that's part of the spec or part of the key date schedule they've already published. I think it's more so with the FAQs to keep an eye on, because again, like an event like today, I'm sure that centres will put forward questions via the portal, and what Pearson will then do will respond to those individually, but I'm sure that it will come forward as a theme, and that will then be updated on the FAQ page, so that everyone accessing that, it's just something, I know it's something else to add to the teacher day, but just checking that for now, as as the qualification is so new, just to check and see what's changing. But this range of products and services, so this will be resources. So tick that box if you want all of that information to come through. But yeah, that's what I do.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, the FAQ, just check that periodically for anything else that comes through. And also, from a with my assessor hat on, I know it sounds like, well, actually, why am I going to go on Facebook? But the group on Facebook, pop a question on there. You get responses back very, very quickly. People are already uploading resources. So the new qualifications, being rapidly developed. So, just to connect with someone else that's delivering is also reassuring as well, and a great, access to resources on there.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
A quick question. It's the Facebook page. It's BTEC Travel and Tourism. It's a picture of the world map with passport photos.
Okay.
Passport stamp, sorry. So it's like the world, and then it's a like a collage of passport stamps, and that's the right page. It's run by a gentleman called Ben Arrowsmith.
Thank you for that.
You're very welcome. I mean, I use it. I mean, I sometimes I find myself in the same situation. I can't find something, and I'll just pop a question on there, and everyone's great, and normally will, if they don't know, point you in another direction. But there's also resources that people are producing all the time as well. So a good place to go.
Fab. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Okay, so at this point, I don't want to lose my voice as well. I'm just conscious that could just disappear and I'll start choking. I don't want to do that. So any kind of questions with regards to registration, with regards to fees, please pop those onto the portal, because again, like anything, if many of these questions are coming forward from many centres across the country, then that will be something that Pearson will need to investigate to come up with a solution for, because that's been whether that's an administrative error or a piece of information was missing, you will get a direct response from that and a resolution, and you've got a trail of that comment as well. That's my best advice. So I hope that is sufficient. I apologize that I can't give you any more information on that, but I'd just like to take this opportunity. I know, with a new qualification, there's a lot for us to get our heads around and understand, and lots of documents, but I think once we are working with it and we're going through those processes for the first time, moderation and marking, and the qualification settles down like any qualification, I think we'll find that actually it is a positive and it is a great qualification, and that our learners enjoy it. And so therefore I'd really like to take this opportunity to wish you all the very best of luck in delivery and successful outcomes for your learners. And that's it for me. Thank you very much for attending and for listening today.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude our session for today, and thank you everyone for attending. We really hope you found it useful. The full session has been recorded, and the replay link will be shared to you as soon as it's ready, should you wish to recap or review the session. Please be aware that the chat log is not available in the recording sent to you. Have a great rest of the day and stay safe.